Hello.
Hello. Happy
All right.
Thursday.
Happy Thursday. It's been like such a weird week because of the holiday, because I'm like not, I mean, Tuesday was Monday. I don't know. It really threw me off. It doesn't usually, really did. I don't know if I'm the only one.
On the plus side, it means tomorrow is Friday, and that's
It
just
does mean tomorrow's Friday. I'm just a creature of habits. And so, like, things surprise me. Change is scary.
Rom, you got your video working. But your audio is not working. Oh man. We can get one, not the other.
Yeah. All right.
Now it works.
Yeah, I'm turning off the video. Let's save some bandwidth here.
Yeah, good to see you. I hope you don't mind. I'd put a bunch of your items there on the agenda since you were opening a bunch of pull requests and issues this week. Figured it would be a good chance to chat about them. I'm guessing Mike just started reading the notes there.
Yeah, Daisy's dad. Yeah. One of my strategies to get people to read notes is to put little gifts like that inside of notes and then find out who read them later because they comment on it. I do have one thing I would like to add as more of a question, maybe for maybe more for Brandon, but also maybe for Sam, who's not here. We identified potentially some outdated info in one of the mailing lists. And I thought maybe it would be worthwhile to do just a little audit or cleanup or review of any like maintainers lists or security lists or things like that. Is also kind of helpful to do those sorts of things whenever there's like a transition. So you have me instead of Amy now. Would that be helpful? Are there lists that you would want to say, oh, we should just go do some like spring cleaning sort of thing on anything?
I don't know all the lists that are out there, and so any cleanup is good to me. I'm sure I'm not surprised to hear there are a few places where things haven't gotten updated over time. Just it happens when we got this stuff scattered in a lot of places.
Sure.
The security list is the one that immediately comes to mind for me.
Right.
That we need
Yeah.
to make sure is up to date with all the maintainers and only the maintainers and administrative.
Yeah. That's exactly, some recent emails had me thinking about that. So then I thought, well, are there others that might benefit from a tidying, a dusting, sweeping, if you will?
I know that I was surprised when I got added as a maintainer, some stuff that I was also pulled in on like the documentation page and other things, the opencontainers.org GitHub repo I was suddenly added to. So I don't know where things get tied together and how different parts of that stuff in the back end all decide who gets access to what, but something to look at.
Okay.
I don't know how that works either because I don't have access to that repo, for example.
Okay, well, let's learn this together. I'll take this as something to spend time on and report back and get y'all's input on what it should be.
Whatever the controls are on it, they're hilariously awkward because however I got added, I was not only added as a person that could merge, but I can merge anything. Like no controls of to maintain or reuse, any of that kind of stuff. It's just like, yeah, submit a PR, hit merge, ship it.
What are you going to do with this newfound power to rule the world?
It's documentation, so I think they knew that they were safe. Coders and documentation, like oil and water, we don't touch. And Tianan, you're bringing up a good question about the TOB list. I know anytime I've ever needed to reach out to a group of either other maintainers or TOB and stuff like that, I've literally gone into Slack and just picked the individual names out and just spun up an individual group chat at that point. Having better options to that would be nice. Ooh. If anybody else has other good stuff like that they want to chat about, feel free to interject. I throw stuff on the agenda just because we have an empty agenda most weeks. So feel free to supersede or add on, append, whatever folks want to do. The first one I put on the list was something from last week, which was I submitted a PR to change a library or a dependency of ours. So second as I get the, let's see. I never know. I'm used to a different version of Zoom where it didn't do the same pop-up that it does now. But yeah, the JSON schema validation libraries that we got in there, the old one was fairly unmaintained. Last commit was 4 years ago, and we were getting various vulnerability reports on that for things like YAML parsers, which we don't do YAML parsing. So why we hear about the YAML parser would be a good reason to say, let's swap that out. And so saw this one out there. It's got a lot more attention, a lot more people contributing to it, and did pretty much what I was looking for. And so I've got a PR sitting out there, and it's a lot of change. Fortunately, a lot of it is deletions. I like deletions. And there's also a few parts in here where I deprecated individual things saying, hey, we're not using this anymore. It was there, but I'm now officially deprecating it. Just so that people know that it's not being used going forward. And so would like to see a few eyes on this one just to make sure I didn't completely go off track there. The reason this one went from unimplemented to the validator is because the validator, if it doesn't know the media type at all, it just does the same thing for everything. It just spits it out and says, I don't know how to handle that. Which was the same thing the unimplemented was doing in the past. So this is sitting out there, like I say, a whole lot of deletions. Some stuff moved around. Some stuff I had to redesign a little bit to get it to work with the new tool because the way our JSON schema is set up, I'm not positive it's the right way, but this was the way to get it to work with our implementation of the schema. So little stuff in there of all the different names, like the def descriptors known by all these different names, depending on which thing is being validated. It shows up with a different name depending on how the relative URLs are showing up. So got a bunch of that going on here. And otherwise, yeah, if folks have questions, comments, reviews, all are welcome. I made the mistake of not opening up the chat and everything else, so everybody is chatting away when I'm not looking. We have spammers on our mailing list? Never. Okay. Folks being quiet on this. nothing else to chat about on this one. The more social one might be putting Rob on the spot then, because we have a whole bunch of, this just making aware so that people can submit a review. I realize it's big enough that it's going to take some time. Yeah, buffering was something I was looking at in this. And I spent some effort in that one, Tianan, to try to only buffer when I needed to. But honestly, I'm not sure how much we really have to do that, because I think the few things that are coming into this are always going to be buffered because it's always a known media type. So it's always going to get read in and then passed through as a buffer.
Yeah, I mean, I approved it. I think it looks fine. My concern there was just that the function in which you're applying the buffering receives a reader and passes that reader forward exactly one time. And so it felt weird to do the buffering there when that function doesn't have any obvious double use of the reader.
So previously, we were making a buffer reader. In the old code, we were actually going through and reading everything into a buffer and then passing a new reader into it. And then from the place we used it, we then read it back out into a buffer. It was like going back and forth 4 or 5 times. This changes it so that the reader comes in and I only turn into a buffer if I have to, because I'm validating by media type, and otherwise I don't do it at all. I just pass the reader through and it goes straight into the JSON.
Oh, because this is a generic interface and
This
it's a
is
public interface.
This is a validate to everybody.
Yeah.
And so
Okay.
anybody can run the validate on any code they want to, but it
See.
only does the media type validation if we know the media type.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Theoretically, they should only be calling this with no media types, but just in case.
Yeah, it just felt weird. Like either the thing calling validate should put a buffer on it if it wants to use it twice, or the thing we're passing that reader to, the FN, should buffer it if it wants to use it twice. It shouldn't rely on receiving something that can be used twice, but that makes sense. Oh, and I guess the
Yeah.
signature of FN might take a buffer.
So I changed the signature of the function. This signature previously took a reader and I changed it to take the buffer directly, so that we didn't go
Yeah, that makes
reader
sense.
to buffer to reader to back to buffer.
Yeah.
So I changed that signature, and that's what caused a whole bunch of these things down below to get swapped out from being taking a reader to taking the buffer directly.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah, this was a fun one to go through and tweak. It did mean that I took out all these read back into a buffer again. I'm like,
Yeah.
why are we doing this? Backward.
Share memory by communicating. We're just doing the
This
thing,
is the
Brandon.
progress. This is
So
the
yeah, I
progress.
guess feel free to respond to that comment with discussed on the call and Tianan's satisfied or something.
Sounds good. Will do. All right. Going forward on the next one, Rob, with some of the other stuff here about performance. Do you want to chat about it, or should I just try to chat in your place?
No, I can speak about this, right? So, yeah, so we did the OCI artifacts thing, and oh boy, it opened a whole bunch of, it's a can of worms there. Okay, so, so let me give a 10,000 foot overview of this. I think people understand this very well, but yeah. So the problem statement is, yes, we have very large things, not necessarily container images. It could be other things and so on and so forth that are now going to land in the in a registry, and then the container world is going to consume. And the container world, we have to be careful. It is both Kubernetes and non-Kubernetes. So you have Dockerisms and Kubernetes, right? So the from a high level point of view, so let me actually describe what the UX is going to look like. So maybe if we can start from there. So today, if you did a Docker pull or a Podman pull or a Crykettle pull or a Containerd pull or whatever pulls that you want of very large images, let's say it takes about, say, 60 seconds. Maybe if we want to reach a place where it takes 6. That is one problem statement. The second one is if you did something like a Docker run or a Podman run or a Kubernetes pod launch and run and so on and so forth, you are going to pull the image if it's not available, and then of course also unpack and mount and all of those things. So all of that also, instead of 60 seconds, takes 6 seconds. So coming again, how does it, so where do you want to solve this is a question. So if you want to address this requirement, even for non-K8s world, which is the Docker world and so on, then you probably want to solve this in the OCI. And when you solve it in OCI, it'll affect all these specs, the 3 specs. Now, how does it affect these 3 specs? In terms of the distribution spec, we can have we can somehow figure out a way to make improvements on how to download large things faster. So the things that we can play with on at least on the distribution spec is assuming just an arbitrary binary blob, whatever, right? So you have 2 aspects. One is TCP and HTTP. These are 2 things that you get to play with. So the proposal there is at the very least, once you have very large images that you want to download, maybe we want to, at least the lowest hanging fruit is incorporate the range request there. So at the very least, if you're downloading very large things and things break in between, at least using range requests, you can recover your downloads without downloading the whole thing from the beginning. Furthermore, if maybe with HTTP 1.1 and 2.0, you have the pipelining of requests. So maybe the HTTP transport, there is something that we can do when you can pull a bunch of things in parallel. Again, this is TBD, right? This is just speculation at this point. Unless we see experiments and numbers, we don't know. So if you pipeline and pull things in parallel, then we take the benefit of that. In any case, there are all these cool tricks and techniques out there that is where we are basically pulling things, bits and pieces of things anywhere from a registry. So all those techniques also benefit from this. So this is the dispec pitch. Right now in the image spec pitch, if I were to summarize all the techniques that are out there to improve all this lazy loading, instead of a gzip of a file stream of gzips and so on and so forth, caching and all of that stuff. So what we are really doing there is implementing a TARFS on our blobs, right? It's a clever TARFS on our blobs. So instead of a particular file system implementation like that, what if we package these layers as actual file systems that you can mount? So the benefit is, if you're able to improve all your downloads and you basically bring down the blobs, then you don't have the cost of unpacking. You can just mount those things because they are file systems, and it is possible today. So that is the benefit you get out of doing it this way. So this is where image spec probably you have to make changes. The third one was the runtime spec. So the runtime spec, I don't think just for this, I don't think there is a huge list of changes there. But at least if you have the concept of a runnable non-container image, then that is something that we need to look at. So for example, containerd to launch, you can pick runc as your runtime, and then it will launch a container image out of it. But what if containerd also has the concept of a plugin where you can say, select on this artifact type instead of launching runc for container image or OCI container images. You can also say for this artifact type, launch this runtime like run was here, this for wasm artifact types. So that is something that probably we can do here. So this sort of covers at least the changes, a summary of changes that could happen if we were to solve this in the OCI world. And if you solve it here, maybe the changes that need to happen outside of this is minimized. So I mean, Kubernetes will have its own machinery, right? So they may have to do something extra on top of this. But if you solve all of this here, then the non-Kubernetes world, the Docker worlds can benefit from this. Anyway, so that's the pitch. Now we can go and look into the PRs and see whether you agree or disagree.
Yeah, the reason I threw up a chat message in the Slack earlier asking for people if they'd done any actual performance test on this was because feel like I saw something from Docker a while back. I don't know if Tiana or Derek would have seen it, but I suspect it was Sebastian that was commenting about this, where they had included this in Moby at one point and then turned it back off. And I feel like some of their comments were kind of steered toward performance concerns of, a lot of overhead, a lot of work, and not seeing the value add out of it in some way. And so that's where I was hoping to get some people that might have some real world experience to say, yeah, we're using these scenarios, we're seeing this value from it, or we're not seeing the value we expected to, either direction that I'm hoping to get some feedback from the community on. Were there specific PRs I should open up for this, Rob?
No, not needed. I mean, we can go over it, but this people can just review at their own time. Nothing special here. So you can say no, this doesn't work, or this is a bad idea, or it's a good idea, or whatever, right? So and then we can move on from there.
Yeah, when I was looking at least a couple of these, I don't know, do we have anything in this file that has any other non-OCI media types in here? You're proposing we add these two.
Yeah, so I use the I use the mime time as it is, but it doesn't. It could be bnd.oci.image.layer.aerofs. It could be that too, but anyway.
Well, my hesitation is that there's nothing else in this file that is talking about anything other than OCI. And so to define media types outside of the OCI spec inside of here feels awkward to me. I'm not sure if we want to go that direction. I don't mind us listing in the spec somewhere else saying, hey, runtime should consider supporting this, but I'm just not sure if I want to include it in this place. And I don't want to, I see us saying, hey, we could define an OCI media type for this. I'm really hesitant to do that unless there's something we're adding on to the upstream spec that's not following theirs. If they've already defined, here's our media type, I feel like it's perfectly good for us to say, hey, we're just reusing what's already there. Despite the fact we came up with our own tar-gz version.
I think one way maybe to think about this is the reason that we have our own media types for the tar plus gzip stuff is that it's not just tar plus gzip. It's also what we have done to encode like whiteout files in there. So it's not just a raw tar. Like the actual container is a tar, but the content of that is specific to how OCI images are specified.
Yeah, I added that comment as well, that if you're using ArrowFS and it's an ArrowFS of an overlay FS layer, then that might be worth calling out versus, hey, this is just a raw root file system. Because there's different ideas for how to do that. Some is just basically replace layering with ArrowFS, and then you overlay them together versus just having your whole file system just be ArrowFS, just one root for the container.
So Ram, do you know if this would be anything specific on theirs for OCI, or are we just copying their file system directly as is?
So the deletions are the tricky part, right? Is the whiteouts and things. But if you did this requires some experimentation, but because that question has been asked. it's easier if it's a full root file system, but if you made the diffs also as squash FS, what does it imply? I don't know all the answers to that yet. So,
Okay.
but the idea again is to skip the unpack part, right? So without all the clever fusing thing that we do, it's just it's a basic solution.
Yeah. And when I thought about the performance, the fusing is something that really comes into play when you do that. Once you start to have a file system in user space that's intercepting all the calls to decide what it needs to do the next pull for, yeah, it can make the container start up really quick, but then if your long running container is going to be degraded because all the requests have to go through that user space, that's where I want to see some research on.
I think that's where ArrowFS is really helpful a little bit, because you can use TCMU instead of a traditional like fuse file system and get more at least like block caching. So at least file system operations can be done more in kernel space. But yeah, I think there's not too many examples of that today.
Do we have links over to their implementations?
Like the I think Nidus is the one that has that today, ArrowFS and TCMU.
Those might be good to drop in the PR just for people who want to read up on it, people like me.
Yeah, I still think there's a lot of work in this space though before it comes to OCI to standardize it.
All right. So open questions on that one still. For the disk spec, this one when I was looking at, I was starting to play the John card at that point. And hopefully I'm representing John as you would like to be represented here, John. But I was questioning how much of this we need to put in here, how much of this we need to really spell out on our side versus just saying, hey, point over to the HTTP RFC, and implementations should hopefully implement that. Because even the responses of the partial content, not satisfied, all that, I feel like we're starting to overlap in what the RFC tells people to do. And so I'm almost leaning towards saying this should just be a single sentence of get requests for blobs. Implementations may want to consider supporting the range header as specified in the RFC.
Is there
Yeah.
specific ambiguity or like registries that aren't doing this today that need this? I'm just curious.
Entirely possible. I'm not, but I haven't tested.
I mean, yes, right. But ones that matter, I don't know.
I felt that.
I mean, I've written registry implementations that don't support this because they're like a function in a Go test. But I think it's maybe good to just include a pointer to this as like, hey, this is important because it does make it a little easier to do lazy access. And if someone doesn't support that, we can say, hey, you should. But
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's the effect. The effect is by spelling it out here, people will take it seriously.
Yeah, I think just including a link to the RFC is good enough for me to think, oh, okay, I should go read that and implement it.
Yeah, I'll update my review on this one with some alternate text on that, because I feel like John and I are probably in agreement on just saying, here's a pointer, consider implementing this according to the RFC, and That way we're not stepping in any of the should, must, response headers, all that stuff, and risking us forking from whatever the upstream does. Is there a preference for whether we say registries should support this, whether registries may support this? Would it just be an implementer's recommendation?
So if you are so if you don't support this, maybe lazy pulling doesn't work, maybe, right? So things of that nature. So and maybe that push comes from the customers or users of this, saying that you should support this because it makes my life better. But at least we recognize that this is important and we call it out here.
Clients should be aware that registries may not support this, and the HTTP spec calls out what happens, which is that you're just going to get a 200 back and the full content. And that's up to you to figure out at that point. But I think for us giving guidance for a registry, I just want to know if we want to say, I'm assuming it's not a must. I feel like that's an easy one to say. You know, we haven't said must in the past, and adding a must is always complicated. But to say that a registry may or should support the range header according to this RFC, I'm open to either word. I just want to get a feel from other maintainers whether that should be a may or a should.
I think if you say it from the registry context, it's a little better than the way it reads right now. The way it reads right now is because a client may include it, the registry must. It doesn't say a registry must support, but it does sort of imply it, right?
I mean, the implication is that the registry either may or should support it. And I'm agreeing with you, Mike. I think my rewording this is going to be registry specific, and then clients should implement the RFC at that point.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Any feelings? I know whenever I say may or should, I pick wrong, and so I figure querying the peanut gallery here before I put a word on the paper in the PR. Because I'm going to pick should at this point. I feel like this is a good thing for registries to include.
Yeah, I think so too.
John, Derek, and Sajay, anybody else have opinions?
+1, 2 should.
Okay. All right. It's easy enough. Any other stuff on this whole long list of PRs we've got? I assume this is going to generate a lot more conversation, so I didn't put anything else on the agenda. Oh, there is something else on the agenda.
Yeah, I've added one more point.
Yeah, I wasn't looking. Do you want to take that away?
Yeah, sure. So I was wondering if you were able to, I'm talking about maintainers, did you have time to look at the proposals of the image compatibility working group, and if you have any opinions about it? The last meeting, we were talking about recording the proposals, and we sent the link to this. So yeah, anybody had a chance to take a look? I guess not. So please take a look once you have time.
I was going to say, I had a chance, but I was the one making the recordings. So I don't think that counts.
It's only 10 minutes, and it will allow us to, move to some direction based on your opinion and feedback.
All right. So how about this? We can go ahead and wrap this meeting up a little early, and then folks have 10 minutes to go play an old recording and see if they have any opinions.
Sounds great.
And if you get done with that, I have dropped a link to a survey that we're fielding about standards in chat, in the Slack chat. So you can also take a survey.
I like surveys. Awesome. Well, everybody's being quiet. We ran out of agenda items. Folks can have a few minutes back, and over in the Slack, this, I guess, jury survey, and scrolling up a little bit, the link to our recording from last week is all sitting out there. So give everybody a little bit of homework.
You have a second too, Brandon. I have a question about making a connection between some projects that I think might, so don't want to bother everybody else with it, but
Sure.
Yeah.
You want me to take over and cut the recording off for that?
oh, sure, yeah. Just
All right.
because I don't
Give me
want to
1 second to
speak
get
on.
that. 1 sec. I have all the power.
I do too now. So Amy is in the process of